Spezza tracks it down in front. Matthews to Marner. Have to hurry. Tim scores! John Tavares overtime winner!
This is absolutely unbelievable by Austin Matthews. A complete turnaround. Take the cake to Mitch Marner.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of From the Booth. I'm John Bartlett alongside Greg Millen. As today we welcome one of our colleagues from Sportsnet and Hockey Night in Canada, Dave Randorf.
Yeah, Dave, terrific job for us doing play-by-play out west. So he's got to jump on a plane every weekend, but it's not easy for him. But I know he loves doing the West Coast games. I did a lot of years, and it's a great gig.
Yeah, the times we see each other the most are always in the airports on Friday when we're passing each other, heading out to whatever city we're off to. So let's head over now to catch up with Dave Randorf. Well, we seem to have another person that is now a member of the Bearded Union in this pandemic. That's a good look for you there, Rambo.
I don't know. This is my it's very, as we can see, Captain Obvious here is very, very great. This is my phase 1 COVID beard. So once phase 2 is implemented and the players get to go ahead and we start reopening businesses and such, I'll probably take my beard to phase 2, which will trim it down, and then we'll go into hopefully preseason, warm up towards the resumption of a season. Then I'll shave it off. But for now, this is it, Barts. And never mind my beard and my hair. It's my blue box that's out of control. That's the problem here at the house.
The recycling catches up when you're home all the time, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I know Millsy's is probably out of control as well.
Well, I'm doing just fine. I mean, so far, as you know, there's lots to be done around the farm here. So I'm quite lucky that I can get out once in a while and still keep my distance. So I'm one of the fortunate ones. And without, poor Bart's with a little 5-year-old, that's got to be a tough go. So I often think about him trying to get through this, like so many others that have children. As you and I know, we're past that stage, so we're a little luckier that way.
Hey, you're right. We're all healthy. We all want to get back and see some games and see some normalcy in our lives, but we're blessed in that we're all unaffected by this directly. And thankfully, I don't even know anybody who's been positively diagnosed. So that's the good news, and that's what's really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Safety first in all this for sure. So that's been a key thing. All right, well, let's get on to the broadcast side of things. So, Dave, you were a BC boy. That's where it all started for you. So why don't you take us back to your early beginnings of what gave you the itch to get into broadcast?
Right at the very beginning, huh? My first job is kind of a funny story in that I didn't set out to be a sports guy. I loved sports growing up in the Lower Mainland. I grew up in North Delta, the outer suburb of Vancouver in the Lower Mainland there. And I wanted to be a DJ. I wanted to be on rock and roll radio. There's a station that's still out there called CFox. I want to be on Fox and play music all day long. That was my direction. And I got accepted to Ryerson in Toronto in their radio and television arts program. And very early on, I got a family friend introduced me to a gentleman by the name of John Wells. And John Wells, well-known sports commentator at the time, and he was the first big free agent signing for a very young TSN back then. We're talking mid-'80s. And so anyway, John says, so you're taking radio and television arts. That's great. Listen, why don't you come on by one day for a tour? I'm 18 years old. I just graduated from grade 12. Everybody in Ontario at grade 13, they were a year older than me. So I was young and naive, and I thought he meant, oh, great, yeah, sure, Mr. Wells. When I'm done my course in 3 years, I'll give you a call. And I quickly figured out that he meant no, like now, dummy. So I go in to TSN. I find my way to the office there, and I've started my first year courses. And they're urging us to go out and get your foot in the door somewhere. And I went in for the tour. And his tour lasted all of like 60 seconds around the building. Here's the studio, here's the television camera, and here's the guy who runs the newsroom. And the guy running the newsroom at the time was a gentleman by the name of Scott Moore, who went on to be your boss, Marksy, your boss for a long time, Millsy. Scott's been a very important figure in Canadian sports media for years. And up until a couple of years ago, he was our boss at Sportsnet and brought me over to Sportsnet. So I walk into his office, and I guess he goes, oh, yeah, Wellesley, this is the guy you told me. Okay, come on, sit down. So he asked me a couple of sports questions, and I knew sports, so I was okay. And he wanted young guys to, and he was a graduate of the program as well. He wanted young guys to come into the newsroom. And he says, okay, so where's your resume? And I said, I don't have a resume. He says, you come to a job interview and you don't have a resume? And I said, I was just here for the tour. He goes, you are such an idiot. Yeah, you can just hear Scott Moore saying that, right? You are an idiot. And he goes, God, all right, well, never mind. Here's what you're going to do. I'll never forget this. Funny the little things you remember at the beginning of your career, whether it's Hugh Millsy as a player or Hugh Bartz in your little break. It was a Thursday, and this is 1985. TSN is 1 year old. And back then, it was a special Monday Night Football on a Thursday night, okay? So there's a game tonight, NFL game tonight. I want you to go home. I want you to watch the game, and I want you to produce a 45-second voiceover script. You know how to do that? Thankfully, I kind of grasped what he was talking about. I said, yeah, I think I can do that. And have it on my desk tomorrow at 9 a.m. Okay, thanks. Thanks for coming. Nice to meet you. So I walk out, start putting all this together, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm living in my grandparents' house. And I've got class tonight. This is tonight. And, it was even an elective class. And you'd think, normally you just skip the class and do what you got to do and prioritize. No, I was so young and naive. I thought, okay, well, I got to go to class. So how do I do this? I go to the local, remember video stores? I'm going to date myself a little maybe. Remember video stores? So I go to the video store. I rent a machine and buy some tape with money I don't have. The machine is a beta machine that is the size of a refrigerator. It is enormous. And it comes in this hard shell case. It weighs like 100 pounds. I drag it onto the bus, all the way 2 buses back to my grandparents' place. I go in. I somehow, don't ask me how I connected it to her old 1970s Electro home television that was, one of those floor models with the speakers on the side. Somehow connected it up. And now I'm talking to my 85-year-old Italian grandmother saying, okay, Grandma, at 8 o'clock, I'm not going to be here. I need you to press this button, the play and the record button. Press them down at 8 o'clock. Can you that's all you've got to do. And she's looking at me going, can't you do this? Aren't you going to be here? I said, no, I got class. You have school tonight? Do you need something to eat? I'm going, oh my God, this is so I left her with the instructions, went to class, got back after 11 o'clock, all the way downtown Toronto, came back up, subway, bus, sit down. Miraculously, Grandma has recorded the show. I can't believe this is actually happening. So it's recorded, it's done. The football game's 3 hours long, and it took me, boys, I'm sure about 5 hours to watch it. I wrote down everything. I had 20 pages of notes. I remember, it's funny what you remember. This was 85. So this was the Chicago Bears and the Vikings. So this was the Bears team that ran roughshod over everybody in the NFL with Jim McMahon and the Fridge and Walter Payton. And it was a great fourth quarter comeback. And so I had lots to write down. So I do the script. I'm up till 3:30 in the morning. And I get back to Scott's office. There it is at 9 a.m. He looks at it for about 10 seconds and he goes, yep, this is pretty good. Okay, so you want to start tomorrow night? And that was my first job. I worked in the newsroom for what was then called Sports Desk. And that's when my priorities started to shift away from being a rock DJ into getting into sports TV.
Yeah, working on the row. I remember doing that too in '99. Same thing, where you had all the tapes here in the booth. Yeah, I did. Yeah, 1999.
You were there as well.
I worked there actually. Who was there? David Amber was actually there at the same time at one point.
People would be amazed. And you call it the row. The row was literally what it sounds like, a long desk with TVs all along the row. And we were assigned to watch games and put highlight packs together for the show. And I don't know what you got paid, but when I started, it was $50 a night, which was great because I could pay for the gigantic beta.
Exactly, yeah.
I had $50 because it probably it was a ridiculous amount of money. And I thought, here I am, I'm 18, and I've already arrived. This is my job for the rest of my life. This is perfect. And people would be amazed at the names that worked along the row that are in Canadian sports television today. And I didn't even know that you were on there. That's awesome.
Oh yeah.
And I find it so interesting for a lot of you that have come through the television ranks, just how many different jobs you did to actually get on the air before you got on the air. And that training, I would assume, would be just so invaluable for all of you. I would assume, Dave, you did most of that at TSN.
Yeah, it was a time, again, TSN was a year old. And this job that I'm talking about that I got when I was 18 and had a month of school at Ryerson, they now give that job to people who graduated from Ryerson or the College of School Sports Broadcasting and lots of other programs out there. So it just wouldn't be available now. So they were so young and so inexperienced, we got thrown into roles and positions that we would never get to do now. So it was great. I got my hands on a lot of different aspects of it, including doing stats a couple of times for the, some NHL game, early NHL games up in Maple Leaf Gardens, Gondola, and that's when I really started to get the bug to do hockey. And so it took a while to get there, but you're exactly right, Millsy. They gave me a lot of opportunity, all of which led up to me sitting here with you today.
Well, that goes from working on the road. Now you get into sort of the broadcast side, which brought you back out west to the famous show in BC, Sports Page. And I guess that's where you can really sort of say you took that big leap in your career as an on-air person. Yeah,
Sports Page was a half-hour show. It was one of maybe two shows like it of its kind in Canada. There was one here in Toronto called Sports Line. Everybody of a certain age certainly remembers that show. That was on at 11:30. We were on at 11, and it was a half hour, and it was a lot of locals, Canucks coverage, BC Lions, Vancouver 86ers before the Whitecaps, or I guess after the Whitecaps and then before the Whitecaps. A lot of UBCS. So there was a lot of local coverage, and this was before the internet. This was before Sportsnet. This was before TSN really happened, and this is a show I grew up watching. So when it came time for me to put out my audition tape, which I made, and I had the good fortune to make, at TSN, I sent them from everywhere, from Halifax to Victoria, BC, and all points in between. You know the drill, parts.
Yep.
You follow up with polite persistence, with phone calls and letters. And the one guy that always used to have the time, Dave, for me, God rest his soul, Paul Carson, who sadly passed far too young in 2010 from cancer. He gave me my first break. A phone call came in out of the blue. Something happened. Somebody left. And because we developed a little bit of a long distance relationship, I was still working at TSN behind the scenes. And within a span of 3 days, I was on a plane, went out, did a field report, came back, did an audition, which I'd been practicing, in the newsroom back at TSN, and was offered the job. And I think I was moved out there like less than 10 days later. And my whole life changed. So those days were great. They left us alone. It was a very popular show, and it was very popular long before I got there. But it was kind of a local institution show. I still, to this day, my last show was in 1995, I want to say. I kid you not. I do not go more than 6 months. This is 25 years later. I do not go more than 6 months without somebody somewhere in Canada going, man, Sports Page. In fact, right now on Twitter, there's some guy who's putting out highlight reels of each playoff game from 1994 when the Canucks made it all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Every second or third day, he puts out our whole first segment. I don't know where he's got this stuff from.
Yeah.
But I kept it on VHS. But so as we speak right now, this guy's doing this. So it really resonated with the locals, and I'm very grateful for those days. They were great learning days, and they were a blast.
But for just the second time in their 24-year history, the Canucks have opened the third round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Game 1 went tonight in Toronto, where the Leafs were fresh off their Game 7 win over those pesky Sharks. It was so big that Tom Cruise chose to pay most of his attention to the ice rather than Nicole Kidman. There's a real fan for you.
So before play-by-play, I mean, you were a host for a long time, and I know you mixed in play-by-play as well. CFL. Maybe we should go there a little bit. And you're hosting a desk. You did a lot of work with the CFL. How did that work for you in terms of being on the desk, working such a big show, and you have some stories about it?
Stories, geez. Well, first of all, I'm very proud of those days, and I love my job now, and very grateful for my position. Bart's will attest to this, and you and I have talked about it many times. Yeah. You've been with Hockey Night for many years, and I've got some things to say about that a little later as we go along. But I'm very proud of the time that I had and very grateful for the time that I had. They gave me tons of opportunity to do the studio hosting, as you say, and to dabble in play-by-play, which ultimately led to me getting hired by Sportsnet. But the 12 seasons that I hosted the CFL on TSN were very special mainly because I always had a soft spot for the Canadian Football League and BC Lions. Grew up going to games at Empire Stadium, first of all, and then to BC Place, and really loved it. And behind me there, I'm very proud of that. That's a ball from the 100th Grey Cup, and I was a host of that landmark Grey Cup day in Toronto, and then they were big shows, but it was the guys that we worked with, just like you, Bartz, and Millsy, and Louis DeBrusque, and Gary Galloway I work with, and all the guys behind the scenes. It's the guys you work with, and everybody's got a common goal and a passion for it. And they also got senses of humor. So the guys that I worked with, Chris Schultz, Jock Climby, Matt Dunnigan, and then eventually Milt Stiegel, and a bunch of other guys along the way. But those are the main guys that I worked with in the studio. We had so much fun. And again, to this day, I still get a lot of very nice and positive comments from people who are football fans. And that's the number one thing they say is that, man, you guys, it looked like you guys were having so much fun. And that's a real compliment because we were. And a lot of the stuff, we would sit back, we'd come on, introduce the game, then the game would start. And then we would, there we go. There's Schultz and Matty and Jock. That's right. So we would sit back and we'd put our feet up on the desk and we'd watch the game and we would just BS and tell stories. These guys, those guys in that picture, they've got countless stories. Players have amazing stories. Millsy is no exception.
A couple.
All of us who've never been there, me, John Bartlett, and every other broadcaster, poodle, as Millsy likes to call us, we soaked that stuff up. And so it was easy for me. I would go, Schultz, you have got to tell that story. He goes, really? I said, yes, you are telling that story. And Matty had, tons of story and that Southern twang, and it was always funny. So, you know what? I'm very grateful and proud of those days because, there was a time when the CFL was kind of like this, and TSN came in and, lifted it up and gave it a lot of polish on television. And, we like to think we were a small part in that, and proud of that. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, and you did a wonderful job on that. And I am curious to ask you about the CFL right now, though, and what they're going through with the government. I know you have a great passion for the league. Mm-hmm. This is tough times again, I would imagine, being a ticket-driven business like the CFL.
Yeah, that last point you make is the one. We are talking about going back to hockey games. I think we all agree if there's going to be games anywhere in the near future, it's going to be in an empty arena. I don't even think we're going to be there, guys. I think we're going to be doing it remotely. That's just my own opinion. The NHL can do that, not long term, but they can do that. The Canadian Football League cannot. They've got a good television deal. They've got some good corporate partners, but not to the level of the other big four in North America, not even close. So they require that gate revenue to the point where a lot of their scheduling as to when their games are playing, when certain teams play there on their certain nights, is really influenced by what their fan base and season ticket base wants. So they're really, really in a tough spot. And the news broke this week. I don't know when this is going to air, but it broke in late April that they've asked for some financial assistance from the government, which always irks people, and I get that completely. I totally understand, and I would totally understand if the federal government said, "Listen, there's way bigger fish to fry right now. We understand Canadian football. It's a 100-year-old league, and that Grey Cup there, it's the oldest trophy in North America, one of the oldest sports trophies in the world." And it's got so much history behind it, but let's just hope they come through. I'm obviously pulling for it, and we'll see. But these are tough times for everybody, and CFL is one of them.
Yeah. Well, your experience of football, hockey, you've had a chance to work the Olympics, cover multiple different sports. So you've really had a bit of a variety just before we get in fully to the hockey. But you've had a chance to sort of dip your toe in a lot of different fields throughout your career as well.
Yeah, again, I point back to how lucky I've been. I really have been fortunate. I count my blessings. I've been to World Hockey Championships at men's and women's and different levels, under 18, World Juniors. I've been to Olympic Games. I've literally flown around the globe due to this job. And I'm not even kidding. I've literally gone on one trip. I circled the globe when there was the lockout year. And it's been an amazing ride, and you never wanted to win. But I always, I think I've been very good at stopping to smell the roses and appreciate where I am and appreciate the access that you get and the people that you get to meet, whether it's your teammates like yourselves, and we all have great teammates here at the NHL on Sportsnet. And I'm not saying that in just kind of some trite way. I truly mean that. Yeah. And you guys know that. It's all about the laughs and the memories that you have with it. And it's also, the privilege to get to know and speak to the players and the coaches. I love talking to coaches. These guys they're leaders of men, and they're all interesting guys. They're all, whether you like a coach or not, or whether a coach wins or not, because there's lots of things that go into it. I'm constantly impressed by coaches, and we always get to have private little sessions with them at all different levels. So you're right, to get to go to London and be a part of that and be behind the curtain for that. Sydney was my first Olympic Games, and one of my first big hockey assignments was Nagano in 1998. I actually worked for an Australian television network. I got a job, again, something out of the blue. Somebody knew somebody who knew me. And they had all their sports ready. This was the first time they were going to cover the Winter Olympics. Summer is obviously a massive event in Australia, but this was the first time their version of CBC was going to cover the Winter Games. And they were checking off all the guys they had to cover all these sports. And they got to hockey, because this was the first year they had the NHLers in it, and they had nobody. So they canvassed the room, and somehow my phone rang, and I worked with the guy who was considered to be the Jim Hewson or the Bob Cole of Australian rules football and rugby. He was the voice of these big sports. And so this guy was, Gordon Bray was his name. And he was amazing because he really didn't know anything about hockey, but I coached him up, and he really applied himself. And by the end of the tournament, and it was a unique broadcast experience because it wasn't like working with Millsy where I could just let him analyze the sport, and I can't let him call the game either. We were just kind of trying to find our way through that two-week period because I'm completely the outsider on this broadcast, and he's a huge name. So, but he also required my help on the air, and that was a very interesting experience as well. But it was also cool to be around it. So, I've been very, very fortunate, Bartz, and let's hope we get a few more years out of this.
Yeah, have you got a favorite Olympic moment? I'm going to put you on the spot. I know you have a few. Are there a couple that you remember that stick out?
I was in the building when Usain Bolt won in London, one of his gold medals, and that was it was 100 meters. He won so many times, but that was just to witness that. That was incredible. That was also a night where Paul McCartney led 80,000 people in a karaoke version of Hey Jude. I mean, yeah, it's just, and you go, really? Like, and I've got a press pass. I'm down below. I'm like, we're almost near the track. And Usain Bolt is going to run in about 45 minutes. And there's McCartney. Like he was, a few sections over and along the rail, but he's on the big screen. Yeah, just singing Hey Jude with Paul McCartney. It was, that was a very special night. I remember seeing some swim relays in Australia, in Sydney. That surprised me how intense an environment and atmosphere that is too. Swimming in Australia is like hockey is in Canada. It's a high profile sport. They're very good at it. And they had this real rivalry with the US. And one of the relays was, I don't know if you remember, what was that guy's name? Was it Ian Thorpe? The Torpedo, they called him in Australia. He swam the leg and came from behind to beat the US. And the US had strummed their guitars in taunting the Australians. And I can't remember what the reason why they were doing that, but Thorpe bolted out of the pool. They won the gold. Place was going bananas, and he got out the guitar, and everybody. It was just amazing.
That's great.
The story was behind the guitar, but it was a hatred there. That comes to mind right off the bat. The Olympics is such an incredible event to be around, and of course, being around for some hockey moments too was cool. World Championships too, Millsy. I'm looking at that Canada jersey. That is an event that I always said, man, when this ends, I hope I enjoyed every second of it and people always ask me, what was the World Championship like? And it's become more high profile. I did it for like 12 years. And it's become more high profile now, I think, because there's more games on. Back then, we just used to do the Canada games and then one or two of the medal rounds. Now they're all on. But I always used to say to guys, you guys go. Get a bunch of guys or girls, do a trip. You can plan it 2 years in advance because you know where it's going to be. It's not going to be cheap, but you're going to be in one of the great cities in Europe, and you get hockey fans from all over Europe converging. There's beer gardens. The weather's great. It's a completely different hockey atmosphere in the rink than anything that you have experienced at an NHL game, even a Stanley Cup playoff game. I said, if you come back, you don't have to go for the whole time. Go for like 4 or 5 days. If you come back and didn't have a good time, I'll give you all your money back. I mean, it's a blast. And
Highlight of my career, period.
there you go.
I hear you.
I can't tell you how many
Putting
times
that sweater on and playing in that tournament was the highlight of my career.
and being around that, and you know, I did a gold medal game in Moscow, and leading up to that, we were an overtime away from having Canada against Russia in a gold medal game in Moscow. And the Finns beat the Russians, and so it was too bad. But still, like hearing that Russian national anthem in Moscow, it was. I think our national anthem is the greatest one in the world. The Russian one is pretty good too, boys. And when you hear it in Russia, with them singing and tears on their faces, flags going, it just telling you the story right now sends chills down my spine. So many international hockey moments I really, really cherish too.
Yeah,
it's interesting, eh? You know, Bart, you remember your first time you got an NHL, your first NHL game. I can remember mine was Detroit at San Jose. It was the back end of a doubleheader on TSN. But all the games, the little games that had led up to that. My first game was an Air Canada Cup in Sudbury, and that's where I got my hockey training. TSN. I did a whole bunch of little games, Hockey Canada games at all different levels, Telus Cups, Royal Bank Cups, Air Canada Cups, under 17s, SO. You've done a lot of the SO women's stuff, Arts, So my first break to get an NHL gig was I got called in. I was living in Vancouver, I was working for TSN, and there was a back then CIAU championship. It's now CIS, or no, now it's U Sports.
U Sports, yeah.
Yeah, it changed every couple of years. So this was the women's championship. It was in Calgary. The analyst was Cassie Campbell back then, now Cassie Campbell Pascal. And I got called at the last minute to do it because Paul Romanow got sick. So he's sick, and they said, can you do this? And I said, yeah, sure. So I go in, and I'd done some small games up to this point, so I thought it was going to be okay. And this was late 90s, maybe 2000, and God bless the women's game. I truly mean that. I've done lots of women's hockey, but it has come a long way since this particular game. Yeah. This was a terrible game. It was 1-0 in overtime. Kim St. Pierre was one of the goalies for McGill, so she was stopping everything, and they just didn't have the shots that could beat her. And so it wasn't a great game. I think even women in that game would compare it to today's game and agree with me. So I hope that doesn't offend anybody. But the point of my story is, fast forward a year later, TSN reacquires the rights, and we're all excited, and we're thinking, great. And I get called into the office to talk about my role. And I had no NHL experience whatsoever, and I'd only done a few of these types of games, well, more than a few, but enough. And I was told that I was going to be like the second guy doing play-by-play. And I was floored and blown away and super excited. And I said, thanks, and I'm going to work hard to make sure that this decision was a good one for you guys, and thank you. And I said, but before I leave, I've got to ask, we thought you were going to hire somebody. We thought you were going to bring in other more experienced guys. What made you think that I can do this? Because I think I can, but what was the clincher? And a guy by the name of Rick Briggs-Jude spoke up and said, remember that women's game that I called you the last minute to do? I said, yeah. He says, that was a terrible game. And I said, well, it wasn't the best. He says, you made it sound good. And if you can make that game sound relatively entertaining, you can do it. And you know what? It's a funny story, but it's also a great lesson that I've never, ever forgotten. Yep. You never know who's watching. You never know who's paying attention. You never know when somebody is going to need somebody and how they're going to be influenced. And there was a random game that probably had 50,000 viewers max, coast to coast, that I got called into the last day that ultimately led to me being hired by Hockey Night in Canada. So I did a few years of backup, the B games on TSN, but got enough. Then I got to do the Habs regional games, as John did. John's an alumni of that group as well.
Yeah.
Then the phone rang from Gord Cutler and Scott Moore and Keith Pelly, and I was thrilled to be brought into our team as it sits today. And my first Saturday night was Montreal at Philadelphia. Went into overtime, Bart's, or maybe a shootout. The Habs were down like 4-2 in the third period and came back and won 5-4. Did it with Gary Galley. Mark Askin, who you guys work with as your producer, was the producer. And it's very special to be a part of the Saturday night history. And we've just completed our 6th season. You all can relate. And Millsy's been a part of it for a long, long time. And I cherish that summary over my shoulder too. That was earlier this season when I got to do a Toronto-Montreal game on a Saturday night, which was got it signed by Carey Price. And I don't get anything signed. But that one I felt I had to keep because, I remember watching those Toronto-Montreal games before I moved out to Vancouver. I used to sit in my grandpa's basement with him. He had this little apartment downstairs where just the guys were allowed. And he'd fry bologna and we'd drink Carlton Cola and we'd watch the Habs and Leafs. And I know he was proud of me that day.
Yeah, well, that's a great story indeed. And I think we all kind of share those same stories, right? When we talk about Saturday night, and it's always remembering our youth or remembering the kids. I always think of that when doing a Saturday night game. It never matters what the matchup is or what the standings are. Saturday night is special because there's no school the next day. So the kids might get to stay up late for that one game that week to watch. And it always has that little extra air of being special on a Saturday night. So
it does.
Yeah,
it really does. I feel it. We feel it. We work different nights of the week, all of us here, and it feels different. Especially, I do a lot of the Western games, as you guys know, and when Calgary and Edmonton get together, or Vancouver and Edmonton get together, there's a buzz in there, and it's unmistakable that it's a Saturday night. So it's a real honor and privilege to be a part of this group.
Real quick, you go west every weekend. People don't realize what a grind that is to jump in a plane and go all the way west
years, Millsy.
and all the way back. I do, and but I do want to quickly talk about the 3 teams out west and how well they're doing. And you get to see Connor McDavid, who I don't get to see a lot. Maybe a very quick, if you could just quickly share a little bit about the Western teams and how exciting it's been this year for them until this.
Yeah, and I would throw Winnipeg in there. Winnipeg always is kind of,
Yes, absolutely.
Winnipeg, that barn, I think we all agree, is a great rink to do a game in. It's always full. It's one of the best booths in the league in terms of being right on top of the action, right close to the game, right, Bart?
Yep.
That's very important to us play-by-play guys. So Winnipeg as well. But starting from the West moving in, it's been a long time since the Canucks have been in the playoffs. And they are obviously tracking in the right direction right now. And I feel you feel bad for everybody involved. But the Canucks were really, with the emergence of Elias Pettersson last year and the addition of Quinn Hughes this year, who is spectacular, guys. For those who don't stay up that late to watch number 43, the defenseman for the Canucks, you're going to see him for years. He's not big, but he is shifty and he's magic. And he's got that Pettersson and Besser and Horvat up front. They've got goaltending now in Jacob Markstrom. And it's all brought together, I think, extremely well by Travis Creed, a guy who was a smart, heady player who played a long time in the NHL and knew what he had to do to stay in the NHL as long as he did. And he's trying to instill that. Calgary, they took a step back last year because they had a great season. They were an elite team in the entire league, and then they got bounced by speed and intensity of the Colorado Avalanche last year. And they were kind of finding their way back, and I think they were going to make the playoffs. But, the real cherry on top out there is being able to sit and watch Connor McDavid. And now Leon Draisaitl. Let's not forget him either.
Right, exactly.
David, though, he's now in his 4th season, and so we've gotten used to it. But what startled everybody for the first time you see him live is truly how fast the guy is. And Bart, you can relate to this. You have no time as a play-by-play guy. If he picks up the puck down here in his zone and reaches up the ice, it's like calling a 100-meter race.
He's going that fast, yeah.
This long, you've only got room for this much commentary before he's in and taking a shot. You really have to economize your call because he's going from here to here like that. And I'm used to it now, but I remember when I first saw him, I was like, wow, so fast. And now we see a lot of faster guys, but nobody's still as fast as him. But the position that we have in Edmonton, the commentary position, is actually at concourse level. It's right above the TV cameras, the main play-by-play and ISO cameras. So you're in the bowl and the crowd's on top of you. And we're the only guys that get to sit down there because the place has got called Rogers Place. So we're very fortunate because the other booth's way upstairs. And so that is a very special seat to have too for all that. And again, don't tell anybody, but I love this job, and
we all do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Well, this has been great, Dave. Great catching up, and a lot of fun sharing some stories. Yeah, and hopefully we talk about all these booths. Hopefully we'll be back to them soon.
Do I have time for one quick little ad that I'd like to throw in?
Sure, you got 20 seconds. Go.
Bart's, I remember you came up to me at a game in Barrie years ago when you're trying to get to where you are today. Congrats to you, because you are doing a fantastic job. And I want to say thanks to Greg Millen. This is my 6th year. Greg's been there, done that in Hockey Night's world. And he was a huge, huge help and influence to me when I came into this group. And I want to say thanks, Millsy, and I miss working with you.
That makes me feel good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave. Stay safe. We'll chat again soon.
See you, boys.
Great catching up with Dave, and lots of sports, lots of stories you could talk about there. And the funny thing is, one of the great memories I have of Dave actually involves being at a CFL game together at the Rogers Center when they had one of the very first Kick for $1 Million games, where the contestant on the field hit it for the $1 million from the 50-yard line. And I was in the stadium that night to see the kick. Dave was, of course, on the field, and I'll always remember his reaction in the face. Holy cow, this guy just did it and won $1 million. So that's always a funny memory, and I'm sure one that he remembers as well, to see a guy kick for $1 million just like that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, boy, you'd be shocked as a broadcaster not expecting it. I mean, we all know that when those situations when they happen. I also really enjoyed his Olympic stories. I thought there were a couple of dandies there, and anybody that's been doing Olympic games, he's right. They're very special.
They certainly are. They certainly are. And lots of great memories indeed, and great that we got to share them. And glad we could share them with you. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.